And this is the most astonishing fulfillment of Bible prophecy. And I want everybody to understand that this has taken place within just a short period of time. And everybody right now knows what the European Union is. However, 20 years ago, nobody had a real solid proof of where we're going to go with this. Well, let me tell you what's interesting, though. Right before Israel becomes a nation, in May of 48, something starts to happen in the world. This is really incredible. I want you to pay attention to this. The Treaty of Brussels was signed 2 months prior. On March the 17th, 1948, Belgium, France, Luxembourg, Netherlands, and the United Kingdom had signed this agreement, which was the first step to what we know today here in the year 2009 as the European Union. That happened 2 months before Israel becomes a nation. Right around that same time, just a few months later, in August 23rd of 1948, the World Council of Churches just so happens to be formally founded. You say, well, why is that important? Because, folks, there's 3 major players in the last days. Remember, Jesus said it's all going to take place in one generation. Israel, the European Union, and a religious hierarchy system will show up. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute, which we obviously can see its formation through this ecumenical movement, bringing the world together under the guides of one religious system, under the guise of one political system, all in the same timing of Israel becoming a nation. Is everybody still with me? Okay. Now, as I said a minute ago, this is not to be mistaken as the revived Roman Empire, because it's not revived, it's being revised. And there's a big difference in that. This revised system of Rome is literally an amazing story when you think how it first came about. The Treaty of Brussels, I mentioned a moment ago, evolved into the European Coal and Steel Community, which was founded in 1950. And then it took a little while for people to start realizing that what's happening here is quite an amazing thing, because all of a sudden we're getting all these merging combinations. Remember, we've got something happening with these feet, that's a combination, a composite of things. Iron and clay mixing together. Well, then, of course, this organization had a practical side, but their vision was for something much bigger, and that is for their nations to get along together and come together as one. Of course, this began to create the European economic community and onto the common market. Matter of fact, if you look at the titles, how it came about, the Treaty of Brussels, followed up by the European Coal and Steel Community, that followed up by the Treaty of Rome, then, of course, the EEC, and then the Common Market, and then the European Community, and finally, their final thing is now the European Union. And let me just tell you, whether you realize it or not, right before our very eyes is the most astonishing Bible prophecy of all time. Literally, what Daniel was given Nebuchadnezzar's interpretation has never happened before. This has happened in our day. You know when the European Union finally got it together? 1992. Would you say that's pretty soon? That was pretty frequent? Or, I'm sorry, pretty recent? I was born at an early age. Okay. Time Magazine did a cover story on Europe. It's called America's New Rival. Listen to what they say. The European Union's 27-member state has approximately 500 million people. How many know that's bigger than America? The European Union describes itself as a family of democratic European countries. The European Union has land borders on 21 nations. The European Union's member states combined represents the world's largest economy of gross domestic products and the 7th largest territory in the world by area and the 3rd largest by population. This has all happened just within a little over a decade. What are you talking about, John? I'm telling you this, folks. What we saw in that vision, when it comes down to the feet, we're there. We're at this point. So what do you mean? Well, just as each kingdom, there was a particular material that each kingdom was represented. It represented a characteristic. It's this way with this iron mixed with clay. This kingdom has a distinctive characteristic of having a composite of two very important ingredients in our current time. You say, well, what are you talking about? Well, first of all, let me tell you something interesting. First time I ever flew into Brussels, Belgium, I'm looking out the window, and you can see this very odd-looking monument. Had no idea what it was. Of course, it intrigued me because there's lots of people going there. It's a big tourist attraction. It's actually called the Auditorium, and it was built back in 1958 during the Universal Expo, and it was built to represent a time of peace and harmony to the world. What's interesting about it is the man that you're seeing right there was the man who designed the Auditorium. He designed it. Now hear this, folks. Keep in mind what we're talking about tonight. He designed this, and it's one of the major symbols in the headquarters there in Brussels of a very unique thing. It is the iron molecule enlarged 165 billion times. Now, of all the symbols, isn't it unique that they would use an iron molecule to represent their kingdom? Now, if you know anything about Brussels and all the European nations, you know they're not Bible believers. Only about 2% of the European nations consider themselves Christians that go to church or anything of that nature. Now, let's look again at Daniel 2. Is everybody still with me tonight? Now, it's going to start getting good now, okay? All that history stuff, that's okay. We're going to get in some good stuff now. Whereas thou sawest iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. It can't work. But isn't it interesting, to this very day, they are trying their best to unite, and they can't get it done. Matter of fact, you see them as they're demonstrating in the streets and doing their parades, and the slogan is one government for Europe. And they're pushing and pushing and pushing for it, and they've been doing this for year after year after year, and they can't get it done. What a bizarre thought, because that's exactly what the Scripture says. They can't seem to mingle good enough. There's a little bit of unity there, but the unity can't fit because you can't make iron and clay fit together. It won't mix. It just won't work. It goes on to say in verse 42, and as the toes of the feet, I want you to remember that, toes, and you'll see why later on as I wrap this up tonight, because it's not just the feet, but it's going to come down to the toes, and it'll be very important in a minute. As the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the what? What does it say there? So we're talking about another kingdom here. This empire, this kingdom, this rulership is going to be partly strong and partly broken. Now, the reason why is because the clay that's being used here is very, very interesting. It's later on described as being brittle. Now, everyone listen to this, because this, I hope this is, I spent a whole day trying to work on this today. I hope this is going to really make you think for a second. Do you all know that ceramics start out as clay, right? Okay. Maybe you'll remember from your school day that you get ceramics by baking clay. Okay, now remember, this is clay mixed with iron. We commonly think of ceramics as art objects and decorations. Most people are aware of ceramics in their homes. It can be found in their art sculptures or dishes or platters or kitchenware or kitchen tiles or in the bathroom structure. What most people aren't aware of, though, is how diverse ceramic materials really are. Now, stick with me for a second. This is going to be really cool. They're used for almost anything. All types of digital electronics, telecommunications, cell phones, HD TVs, thermostats, semiconductors, automotive electronics, subassemblies, ignition systems, heating elements, brake pads, automatic braking systems, airbag restraint systems, dual-core microprocessors, home appliances, medical implants.